I think it's about time I give my Kev. I think it's about time I give my dropper post a little maintenance. It is an KS Lev SI. Now I've had this thing on my bike for about 2.5 years, and it's starting to get a little sluggish, coming back up and even going down, just giving me a little bit of a hard time. So time to give it a little maintenance. First thing I checked, of course, that people are probably going to say is I checked the air pressure in it, and it was at 150, which is the minimum, 150 to 250. So I pumped it back up to 200. That alone should help. But KS recommends servicing this about every 6 months or so. So 2.5 years, I think it's about time. The closest video I found was the Lev CI. So I'm going to use that as a guide. And according to that, you need a 22 millimeter spanner wrench for this. You're going to need some SRAM butter. I'm going to use WD-40 as a degreaser, never use it as lube. And then I have a little clean rag. I have my bike stand where I'm going to put it's up there actually, where I'm going to put the actual dropper post on there. And I'm doing this as I go. I have not taken this apart before, so any surprises, we'll find them together. So what I did is I just hooked this up to my bike stand. Got my 22 millimeter wrench. There's a really fine, not really a lot of space there, and there we go. So we're gonna take the bottom here, just loosened it with my wrench, and then I'm just screwing it out. Because there's a cartridge that's in there, you do not have to release the pressure before you do this. Already I can see some grit, like where there should be some grease. So unscrew this. You can see a little bit of corrosion there, so I'm going to clean all that up real nice before I reinstall it. So first surprise is that on the CI, you take this out and it's not connected to the cartridge. The cartridge is connected to an 8 millimeter in there. So obviously this one's different. You can see as I move, that whole thing moves. So this is not going to have an 8 millimeter in there. I'm just going to have to unscrew this from this. That's going to be a little hard because you do not want to damage this. So I'm going to be very careful when I clamp this to keep it steady. And then I can take this off. So let's see what we can make up to do this. So I had to move inside because it started raining as I was making the video. But so what I measured that shaft, and it's 9 millimeters. So this 3/8 bit is about 9 millimeters. So I'm going to make a hole in here, cut it, and then use a clamp to clamp it. So after a 2-minute drizzle, I'm back outside. This is my makeshift clamp, and it worked like a champ. So I just tightened it with a seat clamp, and then I took my 22 and just unbolted that, and it came right off. Now we just unscrew this cap. And there's a little cap here. And there's a rod. You can see it tapers here. And then there's a short taper at the end. The long taper goes out. So the short taper will go in first when we reassemble. Now I'm going to go up to the other end, the end where the saddle was. I'm going to unscrew this. In my case, this was hand tight. Actually, it keeps loosening every time I ride, so I have to tighten it. So we're going to undo this. And then we can slide the cartridge out the top. Okay, and I can see already it's pretty dry. I think some fresh lube is really going to help. That is very tacky, very sticky. Now, if you look, there is a groove here. There's 3 of them going around, and you have a brass little connector here and a kind of a plastic one, or PTF I believe is what they call that. So make sure I put those in the right direction. Right now that's pretty much what you have. It's rather straightforward. So you have your cartridge, you have your collar here with the seal. You have the inner rod that goes in there. You have your actuator there that's going to hook up to the cable, and then you have your outer tube. There's really nothing else in there except the grooves where these are going to go into. So I'm going to take these out really carefully with a pick, clean all this out, and reassemble. Once I have this out, I can slide the collar out, and then you can see that that's the end of the cartridge. There are some videos out there where they bleed the air out and then take the cartridge apart, but I honestly don't know what kind of oil or anything goes in there, so maybe if this doesn't work, I'll have to disassemble the cartridge per se. Most videos I've seen say that with the basic maintenance, it'll start working as new. It's probably just kind of sticky. So with my pick, I'm just going to come up. I'm going to turn around this way. I'm left-handed. I'm going to come up from above and just pop right out. Again, the plastic one or the PTF one's going to go towards the seat, the brass one below it. Now I can slide the collar out, just right there. And then I'll clean this inside real good, put some new grease in there, and then reassemble everything together. So like I said, I'm going to use WD-40 as a solvent, as a degreaser, not. You see how well that cleans that? Not as a lube, but as a degreaser. I haven't sprayed any there, and see the difference. So let's spray some there. And that's basically, it's going to dissolve all that old grease, and then you can just wipe it clean. Now what I am seeing is that right here, this does have some damage, and that probably is why I have a little bit of play on there, in that that's where it was stuck. So this, I might be due for a new one. We'll see how, once I reassembled it, how it all goes, see how sharp that looks, see how beat up that looks. So we'll have to see how it behaves once I put it together. So now that it's all cleaned up, you can see the damage there compared to there. It's lack of maintenance, so it's totally my fault. Another thing is that on the videos I saw, the other dropper posts, is that right in here there's bearings that when you do maintenance, you grease up. There are no bearings in this, so definitely a cheaper post. It's not going to be as smooth as something that has bearings here, and it's going to develop play a little quicker just from friction. Another little spot that you need to grease is if you look in right there, there's some grease in there, so you kind of push from the top, push that little thing down right there. Whoa, it came right back up, you see it there? And clean in there, and then put a little dab of grease in there. And you can see a lot of corrosion on the tube here from my lack of maintenance again. So this is feeling really rough. Might be time for a new one. I might lightly sand this because it is pretty rough, and then just clean it so it goes in there a little smoother and it doesn't damage my carbon fiber frame. I did have grease on here, assembly grease, that's a little gritty for protection, and still this, just from riding, washing my bike, maybe caught in the rain and stuff like that, I got some corrosion. And I went ahead and hit it with some 800 grit wet sandpaper, and I just wet sanded it a little bit, and you can see the high spots, but it's nice and smooth now. We're going to take some SRAM butter, just a little bit, and we're going to put it in the collar. There's a space right there between like a little bushing and the seal, and we're going to get some grease in there, and we're going to go ahead and slide the collar back in there, just like that. Now we're going to put a little grease right there in those grooves and stick these guys where they belong. So put a little grease there, and that grease is actually going to help keep them in place. And slide them in there, and then put a little grease on top of them too. And just do that all the way around. We're going to put the bump stop in there. Make sure it's nice and clean. And then we're going to slide this guy you have to make sure that these don't come out. There are grooves in there in the tube, and remember that the collar is going to screw on here, so make sure this goes towards the collar. And I'm going to hold them there with my fingers and make sure that all the way around make sure they're still seated all the way around as they slide in. All right, now we're going to put this guy back in after we put the push rod. Now the push rod did not have any kind of lube in there, but I'm going to put a little dab on the tip also, because that's going to be a friction point. I'm going to hand tighten it, and then I'm going to have to do the clamp trick again and tighten that 1/16 to an 1/8 past hand tight. I would not tighten that too much. I'm going to go ahead and tighten the collar. And right there is where it all went wrong. So I actually noticed that I did not have the camera on anyways when I put this back on the clamp, and I went to tighten this guy, and I had it hand tight, I barely gave it a nudge and it just broke in two. So as I was screwing it in there, it broke in two. So I think part of it is corrosion. You know, you can see the corrosion there on the tube, and this just a lot of stress. This is connected to this, then it's connected to the tube, so as there's a lot of vibration and trauma, so to speak, a lot of forces on here as the post goes up and down. It's all the brunt takes it in that little aluminum part. So I did find this part available for about $17 at Worldwide Cyclery, and so I ordered it. 17 bucks. It doesn't include all these internal parts, so these actually screw out right there. So I'll take all these out, put it on the new unit. And you know, in retrospect, I was reading a lot of the comments on KS's video on how to do the Integra version of this post, and a lot of comments actually mentioned that this broke when they tightened it. So lesson learned, but my guess is this was already stressed out. It was going to fail anyway, so I'll get a new one, and I'm just going to hand tighten it, and lo and behold, if you look at the exploded view of the parts list, it says glue, actually Loctite. So they recommend to Loctite the outer, so the Loctite is pointing to this, but what I'm going to do is put a little Loctite on the smaller one, hand tighten it, and leave it at that. So stay tuned for part 2 when it's all put together and see if that thing actually works, or if I end up having to buy a new one, then you can look forward to the unboxing and review video. So as always, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out on part 2.